Hey, it's Drew. And I'm guessing that as a podcast listener, you also enjoy audiobooks. Well, in that case, did you know the audio version of Renegade Marketing 12 Steps to Building Unbeatable B2B Brands was recently ranked the #1 new B2B audio book by B2B Authority? Kind of cool, right? Anyway, you can find my book on Audible or your favorite audiobook platform. And speaking of audio, before we get into today's show, I do want to do a shout out to the professionals at Share Your Genius. We started working with them several months ago to make this show even better and have been blown away by their strategic and executional prowess. If you're thinking about starting a podcast or want to turbocharge your current show, be sure to talk to Rachel Downey at shareyourgenius.com and tell her Drew sent you. Okay, let's get on with today's episode. Hey there, Drew Neiser here with another Drew on Drew episode. I'm really excited about episode 350. Holy cow, that's like 7 years worth of episodes. Anyway, the reason we have a virtual background here is I'm actually looking out over Austin, Texas after 3 days at the Forrester B2B Summit. And I wanted to record this right away because I wanted to get fresh insights that I picked up while I could still remember them. And overall, I have to say it was really an inspiring conference. You're going to hear me at the end say, yeah, I plan on being here next year. The quality of the attendees, you can hear it in the quality of the questions. You really get to see the Forrester analysts in action and the wisdom that they've gained from both talking to clients and the quantitative research that they've done that supports their arguments. And of course, I'm going to admit right away to confirmation bias in that I tend to hear the things that confirm what I believe, but I am going to point out along the way a few of the things that really either reinforced it or challenged some of the things that I've talked about in my book. So first, as you might expect, if you've listened to any Drew on Drew episodes, yes, I'm going to use the CATS framework as a way of pulling together 12 takeaways from the Forrester Summit. So the first 3 takeaways are, yes, going to be in the courageous category. And in the book, I talk about how focus is your friend and why it's so important. But the case study, and they were an award winner, that blew me away at this conference was IBM. And I don't really expect to be blown away by IBM. And here's the story that they told. They used to have 24 go-to-market campaigns on a global level. And they had, going into 2022, had a goal of a 5% growth. So, which is an ambitious for a company that is now $6.5 billion. So here's the deal. They reduced 24 campaigns to 5. So, okay, 24 to 5. Now, I know most of you are thinking you don't have 24 campaigns. You only have 1 campaign. But I guarantee you have 24 things that you're doing right now that are probably could be reduced to a much smaller number. So first, let me give you the results. So they reduced the 24 campaigns to 5 big campaigns, and sales grew 12%. The pipeline to close ratio improved. So what does that mean? That the quality of the pipeline, which of course people use to describe what are those opportunities that sales can close, improved as well. So again, we are not interested in more leads. We're interested in better opportunities. And they were able to go from 24 to 5. So the question for you is, what are the things that you can reduce to help you be more effective? And I was just literally blown away when you hear that a $60 billion company grew 12%. You have to stop and pause for that. Okay, so that was sort of takeaway number 1. Focus is definitely your friend, and there's a business case. Almost no matter how big you are, there are ways that you can focus your organization. Oh, and one last thing about that before I forget, this is why I'm doing this right now. In a second conversation with the IBM folk, they revealed that employee satisfaction, particularly in the marketing department, employee satisfaction went up 5 points. Now, it's easy to think about why, because everybody had focus. Every single person in the marketing department, something like 80% of the marketing department was focused on those 5 campaigns. And then finance aligned behind those 5 campaigns and is reporting on it. So suddenly the 5 campaigns, in effect, became almost the way the market, they didn't admit to this, but it's almost like the company reorganized around these 5, what end up being practice areas. Okay, so focus. That was big tip number 1. Not a new tip, but when a big elephant can do it, I have no doubt that you can do it too. Okay, tip, sort of takeaway number 2, and this is in the courageous category. And George Colony kicked off the event talking about generative AI, and he described the evolution and why this was such a significant moment. He used the metaphor of when the laptops came around, suddenly it was the operating system, DOS, and that made them usable. When the smartphone came around, it was really the apps that made them usable. And of course, Chat GPT is to generative AI in the same kind of thing that's enabling this revolution. I'm not getting to the bold part here yet, but I will. He also defined what generative AI is. And I thought this was really important. Generative AI is when you converge a big pile of data and create the ability to transform it into something else. So right now, these large learning models, if you will take your query and turn it into something else. Now, he was really looking to inspire the folks there to think about this, not about using ChatGPT, but to think about it as a way of taking all the data that you might have and transform it into something else and create the ability to transform it into something else. So now here's where the courage part of it came in. He predicted that Google search would die and that websites as we not know it would go away. Now, this was a rather bold choice, a prediction, and it became a running inspiration of humor throughout the conference about exactly when was this going to happen. But nonetheless, I admired the courage of the statement. And then he followed it up with an example. So right now, when you go have let's say you have an insurance policy, you might have to call your agent or you go to your website and you try to find your policy and you look at the policy and then you try to find, well, gee, do I have the right beneficiaries or not? And what's the cash value of this? And what will it be in 10 years? Well, that data all exists. It may exist in all sorts of different places, but the world that George Colony was imagining is when you go on to Prudential and you check on your insurance policy, there will be a chatbot and just say, hey, I'm going to confirm my identity. And then I'd like to talk to my insurance policy and I'd like to ask it a few questions. And then suddenly, and you know what? I'd like to change my beneficiaries. So the important part of this bold prediction was not thinking about generative AI as the tool that you use to create content for your website, but bigger as a framework for rethinking about all the data that you have and how that your organization will ultimately be able to repurpose that and make it accessible to your customers in service of your customers. That was a big theme, by the way, of the conference. It was, of course, everything in service of your customers. Now, I have to say, we've done this with CMO huddles and our data. We've taken 200 pages of recaps. That was with the help of Noah Breyer from Brand AI, where we took all that data, put it on top of ChatGPT. And so now Becca exists as a bot, as a B2B CMO, and you can ask Becca for advice and counsel on anything B2B related. And it's formed by 300 pages of that data. Now, I wish we had 30,000 pages of CMO huddles data, but we will, and we continue to add to it. So we're still in this world of courageousness. So takeaway number 3 was just a reminder of the need to cut through. One of the speakers spoke about the sea of sameness, and that's most brands in many categories. But the metaphor that she used was colleges. As it happened, she has a son named Drew. Oh, convenient. I'm Drew. And she talked about how they visited 17 different schools And 16 of them gave exactly the same tour with the same points and talked about all the things they did. And it was very, very difficult to decide. Well, in one of the cases, in this micro story, if you will, of the college interview or the college tour, Drew said, I'm a little concerned about residential life. I've never lived away from home. Well, what's that experience like? And rather than answer it there, the tour guide said, well, come see me after the event, and took the time to walk Drew through 3 different dorms to get him comfortable with the experience. Of course, that's the school that he ended up choosing. So how do you stand out in a sea of sameness? And the answer is built into this overall idea of customer centricity and how you deliver customer centricity. And I'm going to get at some of these things in the next points. Okay, so courage we've covered. Focus is your friend, being bold and overcoming the sea of sameness through a customer centricity. Okay, so the next part, artful, right? CATS, courage, artful, thoughtful, and scientific. So point number 3, nomenclature matters. And this is specifically for the CMOs. Any of you CMOs who have performance marketing departments, Dara Tresidder of Autodesk has a note for you, has advice for you. And she said one of the first things she did when she got to Autodesk was to rename the performance marketing group. Why? Because if you have a group named performance marketing, that means that all other marketing doesn't perform. And that's a pretty bad implication. Now, there's a certain irony here because Dara did rename the group to growth marketing. And of course, I paused, being the smart aleck that I am, and thought, well, does that mean that all other marketing is not growth marketing? But anyway, it's a step forward. I think the insight is critical, how you name your departments. And if all marketing is in fact in the interest of growing the organization, then we ought to think about how we name our departments. Okay, so that was point number 4. Nomenclature, how you name your departments matters. Number 5, you always feel the power of storytelling in its absence, and then when you hear a really good story. The point number 5 here is that storytelling matters, and it matters with big audiences, small audiences, and one-on-ones. And we all know this, but it was so great to have a reminder of some of the elements of what a good story brings to the conversation. So in one of the opening keynotes, a gentleman, a Forrester analyst, shared the story of, first he introduced us to Sam. Sam was a 5-year-old boy who had a rare blood disease, who was made a wish to the Make-A-Wish Foundation. He was a big F1 fan. He was ultimately granted that wish. And of course, the weekend that he was supposed to go to F1, it was raining like crazy for 3 days nonstop. But anyway, it all works out in the sense that Sam gets to go to a race. Driver Sebastian Vettel, who's one of the best drivers in the world, Sebastian actually made some time and let him be in the car, and it's a great story, and it was a heartwarming story. But there was a bigger story involved, and there was 2 parts to it. One, Sebastian Vettel leaving one team to go to Ferrari, and he talked about just his personal passion for Ferrari. And this was another part of the story that the Forrester analyst was sharing, was that the Ferrari brand has done so much to build customer engagement and customer loyalty and fans, even though not very few people actually buy Ferraris, but they sure are buying a lot of Ferrari gear, interestingly. Okay, there's a bigger story here that it wraps up, which is that F1 as a business was not doing very well, was starting to stall. And then the pandemic hit and it tanked. And then it came back with a fury, and it came back because of certain amount of customer centricity. And he tells the story, and of course, Sam stays in it. What was so powerful was, there's the tear-jerking story about Sam. There's the business story about F1, and he brought all of those things together. And it turned out the Sam was Sam Buck, who was the son of Nick Buck, a Forrester analyst. So it was extremely personal. Just like the story about the college one was also extremely personal. So just a reminder, find your personal stories, use those The great thing about the F1 story, it was a big story and a metaphor that could house a number of areas. And this came back in one of the last presentations I saw, where a gentleman presenting was able to use animals as a metaphor and had a lot of fun with it. And it happened that it was his dogs at the very beginning, and he had fun with that. So again, it was personal, it had a touch of humor, and it helped as a metaphor. Okay, so that's storytelling matters. I need to take a break here, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to get to number 6, which is a way of rethinking. And this is in the artfulness, is we're thinking about buyers. And one of the more profound things that I heard today was that buying, when you're B2B buying, when you're the buyer, buying is a risk to the individual, not the company. So think about this. Yes, the company may end up losing share or momentum or something because they bought the wrong technology, but an individual is going to be blamed. And if the company is a little more successful as a result of it, will that individual become a hero? Well, that kind of depends. But this really made me think about more of this concept I've talked about in some writing, is the notion of speed to hero. If in fact buying is a risk to the individual and they do make the purchase, then you have to figure out, how do you help this individual who bought it look good internally, give them the metrics they need to defend the purchase and justify it. So buying is a risk, and we want to make it easier for this individual to share why this was not a risk, but a really smart decision, and help them look good. Then you get to this next area, which was also, I guess this is sort of 6.5, which is how trust is built. And in all this conversation about AI and generative AI and how this is going to assist in so many different ways, one of the more interesting facts that is embedded in all of this is trust is human-led. Conversations are the things that will help build relationships. And if you look at what the number one source of trust is across in any buying decision, who do I trust the most? It's your peers. And then it's customers of the vendors. And then it's analysts. Now, when you get to analysts, you're probably talking about Forrester or Gartner. But before that, you're talking about individuals, your peers saying it's okay. So trust is built through humans. So interesting. So, by the way, at the very bottom of this trust meter, I mean, like 3% trust salespeople. It's like, whoa. So ultimately, when we look at this human thing and we think about generative AI, one of the metaphors that was used is that in an ideal world, salespeople become like Iron Man, and they're AI enabled so that they can build trust faster because they know more. They have this little screen, they know more about the customer, and so forth. Okay, I think that's enough on that. One last note, this fits in here. By the time they show up as leads in your funnel, it's too late. And that's such an interesting notion. And by that, it's too late to build trust. So one thought to think about is, how are you building trust? And there's a reason that bigger brands tend to, because I've heard of you. Oh, okay. So that's one thing off the table. If I've never heard of you, how can I trust you? I've heard of you, and I know that if you're the leader in the category, I trust you because other people have already trusted you. So there is something to be said for that. And if you're not a leader, the question that you have to ask yourself is, how is your organization building trust with both current customers and prospective customers? And I think that's a perfect setup to get us to the next point here. Takeaway number 7. And now we're into the thoughtful. We started with courage now and moved through artful. Now we're at thoughtful. And this will shock you because you've heard me talk about employees first, but you can't have a customer-centric transformation if we decide that we're going to put all our energy in the customer. Before you can do that, you have to get your people and your culture aligned, and you have to get them believing in the transformation. And it's so interesting when we go back to the IBM case and we say, oh, how did they get from 24 to 5? And then How did that end up improving employee satisfaction? Well, because everybody understood what it is that they were doing. You were on one of 5 teams, and for an organization with hundreds of thousands of employees, for even the marketing department, which has hundreds of, to suddenly know, I'm on this team and our job is to do this. The people came first. Okay. So yes, and as I recall, and I already mentioned, employee satisfaction grew in the IBM example. So we had a focused idea, which is a big change in how we're going to market. So first, people and culture before transformation, and whether we're talking technical transformation or customer-centric transformation. Okay, so that's employees first, and that's not a new news thing for you who've listened to the show. But one thing that I did take away of this, and I hadn't really thought about the dimensions, and so this will be tip number 8. Rethinking customer value. So we're talking about customers here because for most companies, if you could keep your current customers and maybe upsell and cross-sell them, there's a really good chance you're going to hit your goals, period. End of story. So if in fact customers are responsible for your growth in 2023, then you say, oh, okay, well, what does customer value look like? And here was the interesting thing. So much of our recession conversation has been on economic value, right? Return on investment and speed of return on investment. And even I was trying to get you to think about speed to hero, which is a little bit different, but economic value is almost where most start. And at the beginning of a purchase, that is important. There's no doubt. But there's others. There's 3 others. Economic, functional. Like what function does it serve? And that's important. Those 2, economic and function, like I need an ABM product so that I can monitor the intent data and do a better job of aligning, getting better opportunities into, again, we're focused and we're doing a better job because we know we can identify tire kickers from real opportunities. Okay, so we have economic, functional, symbolic, and experiential. Symbolic is this notion of what does it mean to be part of this? I'm thinking right away of Tableau and Tableauians. Remember years ago, I had on the show Alyssa Fink of Tableau, and she talked about how they built this community and what it meant to be part of that community. And I think that was symbolic value of being associated with Tableau. And the 4th way of getting to customer value is experiential. And this is the one I want to put a really big, just emphasize and put it up on a pedestal, because as we're rethinking customer value, you already have the customer. So in theory, they're getting economic value or they're getting functional value. But are they getting experiential value? And this is the thing I want to think about, even in terms of CMO huddles. I want to go through every aspect of our experience when I get back from this conference and look at it and make sure that we're removing friction and we're adding experiential value wherever we can. And to emphasize the importance of experiential value, one of the Forrester analysts talked about HubSpot making their chief customer officer their CEO. And I thought, okay, that's an unusual and bold move, but it really says, oh, wow, customers are at the center of our organization, so much so that the CEO, who used to be responsible for that, is now the CEO is now the CEO, and made the notion that the customer advisory boards are called hugs. So that's a little bit of, it gives a flavor for the experience. But so we're just thinking about these 4 things: economic, functional, symbolic, and experiential. And no doubt I'm going to have to go deeper on this another time. As we think about customers and retaining customers and everything that we can do, and that's probably the biggest theme of this conference, and certainly apropos for 2023, is how are you delivering value on these 4 dimensions? And how are you making sure that your customers understand the economic value, the functional value, that there is a symbolic value, and that there's experiential value? Okay, I think I've delivered on that one. So I think I've already talked a little bit about prospects. And if we're going to say that most of our growth in 2023 is going to come from current customers. Okay. Or certainly keeping existing customers and then adding a few on. But now we can move on to prospects. And I've talked a little bit about buying is a risk to the individual, not the company. So how do we take this same customer centricity to our prospects? And that was really interesting. How do we make it easier, as Brent Adamson would say, how do we make it easier for them to buy? And you hear a lot about sales enablement or buyer enablement, and I'm going to talk about value enablement. And here we're thinking about a prospect who's coming sort of to by the time they raise their hand and say, I'm interested in your product or service. And by the way, my associates have already blessed you as well. By the time they've raised their hand, by the way, I think they're so far down the path that they may have already made the decision. But one of the things that they're saying more and more is serve me, help me, know me at every stage of the journey. So if I'm a CFO coming in, and I know this is a cliche, but if I'm a CMO coming into your website and I can't find the ROI calculator, or I can't find the speed to value documents, or the Forrester full business valuation thing, or some other way of helping me feel good about this purchase decision, and you didn't make it easy for me to find it. Like in an ideal world, that person was from finance. They come back to the website. You've cookied them. In their landing page is all the information that they need. Know me and serve me and help me. And this is where technology can be incredibly helpful. And this is where this vision that George Colony talked about at the beginning, this is where generative AI could be transformative, in fact. And we're already starting to see that even with conversation bots, how those can be so helpful. Okay, last licks here. Scientific. Okay, yes, my man Ben Franklin on the cover of that chapter. So interestingly, one of the sessions that I attended today was the death of the MQL. And I'm going to put this in the overall takeaway of the wrong metrics. And so the gentleman who was running this session asked folks who still report on MQLs to raise their hand. And I'm going to say it was at least a third, and probably another half of the group was too shy because they knew they were going to be called out on the carpet for it. But MQLs, marketing qualified leads. And he made a passionate case of why this was so problematic and why leads in itself are problematic. And he went through 4 of the objections that always like, oh, we can't change, or this is the way we've always done it, and our system doesn't support it. And this is so interesting because there are certain systems where every single lead that goes in is considered a different instance. And so there's some goofy things like 3 leads that come in from the same organization. Suddenly that individual, if he only closes one of them, his close rate, or if turns it into an opportunity, is 1 out of 3 instead of pulling this together. There's a lot of silliness out there in the world of MQLs. And again, you may, as a marketer, decide I'm going to keep calculating them. But if it is a number that you're reporting on to your board, you have a problem. And in fact, at the very end of this presentation, the Forrester analyst said, MQLs equal job insecurity for the CMO. I'm pausing on that. MQLs equals insecurity for your job. And the reason is that MQLs simply do not matter. What matters is to think about how marketing can, A, increase the win rate. So of the number of opportunities, instead of winning 1 out of 4, you start to win 1 out of 3. Part of that is maybe you have fewer opportunities because they're better qualified. Well, that's okay, because what matters is the wins, not that you have 7x coverage on your salespeople. Number 2, how can marketing affect deal size? And then number 3, how can marketing impact the speed to close? So the win rate means we can improve the win rate because the quality of the opportunities are so good because we have so many different signals that we've got a buying group, they've got a budget, they've done the demo, the CFO has checked out the thing. You checked so many of the boxes, and you're much more likely to win. Part two is deal size. If the right opportunities are coming in there and we're processing them in the right way, maybe we're going to win some more deals, and marketing can have an impact on that. I'm not going to tell you how to do that right now. But lastly, marketing can definitely have an impact to speed to close by delivering the information and value that the prospect is looking for when they're looking for it. Okay, now we can go back to another reason why MQLs are such a problematic metric. 75% of revenue growth for most enterprise organization is going to come from current customers. That's not an MQL. That's a current customer. That has to do with retention rate. That has to do with interactions, and that has to do with brand and how marketing is helping to deliver value to the existing customer. So if the marketing person is only being measured on demand generation, we have a problem. That was a big point there. So what the conclusion of this analyst was, we need to think about marketing lift across the entire business. And here's another way to think about it. There's only two problems: growth and all others. So if we say that problem number one is growth, and growth is going to come from existing customers and prospects, then why are we obsessed with MQLs when we need to have metrics that express current customers and prospects? Okay, finally, one other thought that came into this thing: stop passing leads, start passing intelligence. And that notion, if we want to increase the win rate, and we want to increase the deal size, and we want to increase the speed to close, the more intelligence that marketing can deliver in that opportunity, the more likely those things will happen. Okay, now we're getting to the end here, folks. Big point in this thing, and this, I guess, is number 11, too much tech. 40% of the B2B marketers surveyed by Forrester were spending 15% or more on technology, which in their minds was way too much. And the bigger question is, how much of this technology is in the service of customers? Think about that for a moment. How much of the technology that you're buying is in the service of customers? Most of it isn't, because marketing is so focused on demand gen. And then we get to the specific things, even in the MarTech stack, that you might have 3 different email providers embedded in your marketing technology. Well, that's problematic. So it's really time to do another audit of your technology. And is it integrated? And this is an interesting metaphor that Kate Linford, who was a presenter on the last day, she told the story of these architects and designers who were building a wonderful new park for kids. I don't know if this was in Austin or Boston, I can't remember. And they said, well, steel slides, those are really durable. And she shows a picture of a kid sitting on it going, screaming, ow, because in the summer, that metal got as hot as 127 degrees. Bad architecture, bad design, bad intelligence, not being aware of the customer and the user. So if we want technology to help us grow faster, the tech needs to be aligned on the value that it's delivering for the customers all through the life cycle, not just the purchase journey. So if we can reorient technology around the customer value, then perhaps there's a chance that maybe one, it will be more productive. And then think about technology as outcome focused, not what it can do, but what will be the result of this? Will customers have a better experience? Am I more likely to know the prospect so they'll have a better experience? And so we're going to think about the audit on a much broader basis. Okay, we've reached the end. And tip number 12, there's not enough experimentation. This came up in Dara Tresidder's presentation. 85% of your budget needs to go to things that you know have been effective in the past and will continue to work. 15% of the budget gets to go into the play stack, where we're going to make little bets that can become big pets. And one of the analysts called it, have a portfolio of ideas. And then Dara said, be clear that you don't know which of these tests is going to work. You don't know what's going to happen, Don't overpromise them. And again, if you think about it as a portfolio manager, you have 10 of these experiments, but one of them could deliver 20x, even if the other fail. That's where your big leaps are going to go. And if I could just say one thing to all of this is, where are your big leaps going to come from? Is all of this little incremental stuff that you're doing going to generate it? Or are you going to reduce, as we started with, from 24 to 5, where you're just going to have a lot more impact? So on the data and in experimentation, and she talked about how intuition drives idea and data drives decisions. So if you're going to take your portfolio of ideas, have some intuition about it, those do it, and then you can source that from all sorts of places, and then find a way to get those into the market, test them, get your results, and support the winners. All right, that's a lot, but I just wanted to say I found the Forrester conference amazing, both in terms of reminding me of things that I knew we needed to do, but giving me frameworks and roadmaps to help me sort of rethink some things that I thought I already knew, but how to do them better. I know that come hell or high water on May 8th, 5th to 8th, 2024, I know where I want to be. It's in Austin, Texas at the next Forrester conference. I hope you'll be there. There was over 11 huddlers who are at the conference, and hopefully more will be there next year. With that, those are your 12 takeaways from the Forrester B2B Summit. I'm Drew Neiser. Peace out. For more interviews with innovative marketers, visit renegade.com/podcast and hit that subscribe button. Renegade Marketers Unite is written and directed by Drew Neiser. Hey, that's me. The show is produced by Melissa Caffrey, Laura Parkin, and our B2B podcast partner, Share Your Genius. The music is by the amazing Burns Twins, and the intro voiceover is Linda Cornelius. To find the transcripts of all episodes, suggest future guests, or learn more about B2B branding, CMO huddles, or my CMO coaching service, check out renegade.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep those Renegade thinking caps on and strong.